It's called How Not to Be a Supermodel. And it is a rip-roaring journey. I mean, you can imagine it's quite off the wall. Life as a model in the early noughties, with all of my anecdotal material, including the time when I accidentally became part of an informal sex show.
Hey friends, welcome back to the channel, to Tech Club, the ongoing...
This is Digital Voices.
Hello and welcome back to Creative Behind the Influence. I am Jenny Quigley-Jones, the CEO and founder of Digital Voices, and I am here today with the wonderful Ruth Crilly.
Hi.
Hey. You have been such an OG of YouTube, and like your content is useful and hilarious, and you've produced over nearly 750 videos for YouTube.
Have I?
Yeah.
Just on YouTube?
I think just on YouTube over the last 14 years.
My goodness.
Yeah. And
wow.
You have about 300,000 subscribers on YouTube, another 200,000 on TikTok. But how would you describe your content to someone who has never seen you before, like in a sentence?
Well, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have said I'm a beauty insider and I make beauty and fashion content for social media, right?
Yeah.
But recently, I've been trying to focus on who am I and what do I give. And actually, I think that what I do, and I did a bit of market research with my Instagram followers, I think that I provide slightly aspirational content in that people think, okay, look, she used to be a model. She knows what she's talking about when it comes to beauty. She knows, she loves her house stuff. She loves fashion. So let's look at that content and we will take her recommendations. But on the flip side of that, they love the fact that they see behind this facade of I've done my makeup and I've got dressed for the day, they see everything behind the scenes. So it makes it relatable. And I am probably slightly offbeat. So they come for the lols, as the kids would say, hopefully.
It's interesting because there was a lot of very polished, pretentious content on YouTube around like fashion, beauty, modeling that was very like personalityless. I think a lot of people used to create that content from perspective of, I know what I'm doing, learn from me. Mm-hmm. Whereas I don't get that tone from you. I get like a real like vulnerability, authenticity. You're hilarious. Like,
yeah, I'm bumbling. I just feel like I've always been bumbling through life, and it's only when an outsider says, "Oh, you do this so well," or "I really admire this about you," that I think, really. So I don't have a lot of awareness when it comes to things that I. If someone said, "Oh, your makeup looks great. How did you do that makeup?" I would genuinely think, I wouldn't think, are you being serious? But compared to people that do their makeup well and are professional at doing their makeup, I wouldn't really look to me to do makeup. But that's what they like, that I am at the same level, But I suppose with this extra layer that I was a fashion model for years and years and years and years, had my makeup done by everybody and picked up a few tricks and tips. So that's where the beauty inside of it comes in. But I feel like in recent years, I've been much more myself in that I've just been making quite bonkers things. And that stuff always seems to, people love it. People love the bonkers stuff.
What's your favourite video you've ever filmed?
Do you know, it's a recent one. I filmed for Sky, and they give me the most amazing free rein on my creative, and I come back with the weirdest ideas. I filmed a remake of a trailer for June 2. And even though I filmed it, my husband wasn't even in. Normally he helps me do stuff, and he had to go out and it had to be in by end of play. And I thought, I'm just gonna have to crack on with this. So I went around the house collecting up items that I could make costumes out of. And I filmed it in about 3 hours. Editing was quite stressful on that one. I was just so pleased with it. I'd done about a week of prepping for it, and I'd found the music I wanted to use, and I'd recorded a voiceover using an AI voice. I mean, the effort that went into it, it was high production values.
It's also hilarious.
Thank you very much. But I really enjoyed that. I thought, you know what, I've peaked. I may as well stop.
Yeah, slightly unhinged in a good way.
Yeah. I can't believe I said bonkers. I never use the
No,
word
I
bonkers.
quite
I
like
feel like
it.
it's really overly polite, isn't it? Bonkers.
It's just very British.
I don't want to swear either. I'm trying to give it up, so.
That's so impressive. We
Thanks.
have a lot of swearing on the podcast. So if
Oh,
you want to,
do
like, you
you?
can if you want to. Yeah, it's fine.
Oh, okay, that's good. I'll relax into that.
Yeah, exactly. It's fine. You don't need to be too polished. It's okay. So you were a fashion model and then got into creating content that way. Like, what inspired you to document that journey and to kind of start blogging and YouTube?
So, I've been modelling for a long time and I'd done really well, but it got to the point where modelling was not winding down, but had I wanted to keep it at the same level, I'd have had to have gone to a new market, so Paris or New York or what have you, Milan. And I didn't really want to start again, and I'd got married, and I'm quite a home bird. And so I decided that's when I was going to kick off with trying to do a writing career. So I'd done a degree, I started my master's in creative writing in English. And as part of that, it was recommended that you write regularly and that somehow somebody read your writing. So whether it was you showed it to your friends or you joined writing groups where you all swapped your work. At this point, there weren't things like forums really, or online hadn't really taken off. However, people had started doing these things called blogs, and I was intrigued. And I'd read a couple of them and I thought, I like what they're doing now, and I like the fact that you can instantly publish it, but it's not very good. And I thought, I can do that. And I can do it from my perspective, which is I can give anecdotal material about my life as a model, which nobody is doing. And, and I think I can make this really good. It didn't even exist as a career. It wasn't a career opportunity, which we can probably come back to because it's quite a point of difference in how people come into content creation now. But then it wasn't a thing. It wasn't even an option to do that as a job. I did think from the beginning, you know what? I can see that there's a way to monetize this, even though people aren't doing that. But it was called a model recommends.
Yeah.
So I'm only talking about things that I love and that I would recommend to other people genuinely. So it felt very positive. Yeah. And I thought, you know what? At some point, there is I didn't know quite what it was, but I thought there is a job in this. Yeah. There is a job in this somewhere. And so then it was just this natural progression that it just exploded. Within sort of 6 months to a year, it had become a real thing, you know.
And that was, so initially you started wanting to write. So when did you decide to transition and create a YouTube channel? Or was that from day one you thought, I'll do both?
Quite soon after I started, I did the YouTube because I realised really quickly that you can write about a bronzer and you can write about an eyeshadow, but actually all I wanted really was to embed very short clips of how it looked going on. But you couldn't. No. And even now you can't really, it takes so much server space, wouldn't it, to embed videos on your own website. But then there definitely wasn't the capacity for it on Blogspot. So once you'd started filming on YouTube, it wasn't like now where you might people might do a TikTok of an eyeshadow going on, it's maybe 8 seconds long. That just didn't exist. So by the time you'd sat down and gone, hi, and set up your lighting, this is the eyeshadow I want to talk about, you'd have done a 6-minute bloody intro on this one eyeshadow and, and put it on and rambled for ages. And so it just took off from wanting to have a visual little extra, a bonus to go with the post really, but then that took off separately.
And did you prefer it? Did you prefer the YouTube side or the blogging side, or did you just love them both?
No, I've always preferred the writing side, mainly because I find writing really natural and I really enjoy it. And I do love speaking and I do love being on camera, but I find it really exhausting having to prepare for it. So having to do all the bits to make yourself look presentable for the camera, which is why I quite like it on Instagram stories, because I just go on, I've got no makeup on, I know it's going to disappear, I don't really care, and people really like it because it's reality. But I think when it's a video that's going to stay and people are going to come back to it time and time again, there's this feeling that really you should look a little bit more presentable. And I suppose as well, I've always been, because I came from that modelling heritage, you were used to putting yourself out there with very high appearance standards.
Yeah.
And so the idea of putting out a YouTube video and looking really rough, in your own opinion, wasn't so much of an option. And so I used to find that quite, you've got to get the lighting, and it's just more of a faff. Whereas you can just open the laptop, sit down, and you'd get on with it. So no, I always preferred the writing, but I think that the video has probably been much more instrumental in sort of growing an audience and keeping an audience.
Do you feel like your two audiences are the same, or do you find your blog audience is very different to your Instagram and YouTube audience?
I'd say there's a crossover. There's more of a crossover between YouTube and blog readers than there is between Instagram and blog and YouTube. So I think there's a real thing, both YouTube and blogs are long, they're long form. Mm-hmm. Whereas your social media, TikTok, Instagram, it's very little required in way of concentration. And that's more difficult to get people to swap across. If you say to them, right, here's a blog post, it's going to take you 15 minutes to read. Yeah. That's more of an ask.
I think they're less invested in you as a person as well. Like, we did an analysis of YouTube creators on Instagram and their engagement rates versus just Instagram creators, and the YouTube creators had way higher engagement rates.
Interesting.
Because their audience felt like they really know you, so it's more of a friendship thing, whereas on Instagram it's like...
I feel like on Instagram there's very little time to get across your real personality, and because it's a different era. So YouTube, you could vlog, you could do a recipe, you could do a makeup tutorial, and everything was just sort of accepted. If that's what you want to do, that's you do you. Whereas on Instagram, I think people are constantly fighting to work out what they should be doing. So what's the trend that I should be doing here? Should I just be doing a faceless thing where I only put my feet in? Or, should I be doing a voiceover? Should I be unboxing something? People are so focused on views and the numbers that I feel like you lose. Yeah, people aren't so real on Instagram, I don't think. You don't get so much personality.
I think it's also, in some ways, people I think realer on TikTok, but the trend chasing to grow has got worse on TikTok. And I think
just the word growth makes me... I've been to a few things recently where it's been seminars talking to creators about how they can grow and how they can beat the algorithm or work with the algorithm, and the whole thing, honestly, I know it shouldn't, because I should be more professional about it, but it really leaves me cold. It's the exact opposite of what social media was supposed to be, which was connecting with audiences, connecting with people in a new way, and people felt like they knew you, and you answered all their comments. And I mean, last night I had must have been 16 back and forths exchanges with a Instagram follower I've never spoken to before, and we were talking about foundation shades and what would be her best foundation shade. And it was probably sort of 10 minutes of my time, which is quite a proportion of time.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing that I like about it. I mean, I couldn't do it 200,000 times over, but that connection with people, and I find it the ultimate compliment that someone would think, you know what, I'm going to message her and just see what she says. And with the not even the hope that I would reply, but they almost expect a reply. And rather than me feeling that that's a real ask or an imposition, I'm actually really flattered by that. Because they're thinking, it's just like, then they're asking me in a way you'd ask a friend.
Yeah, there's like a real intimacy in that connection.
Yes.
Whereas I think you're right. I think that the search for growth is often about a status thing. So there was a stagecoach party that's kind of that happened in the US last weekend, and they had influencers go with friends. So you could go with your influencer friend, but then you got to a stage where they had 1 million followers and above can go to the right, and then anyone less has to go to the other party. And someone went viral because they said they didn't think following was an appropriate measure, and they got filmed and posted online. And it's really interesting because I think we attribute such importance to this follower number, not to engagement.
What is happening? I mean, honestly, that just sums up exactly how I feel about what's happening. The problem is that content creation has become a job, right? But unless you've got something to say, unless you've got something to offer the people that are following you, there is no longevity in that. And where are you going to go when Instagram or TikTok don't become the hot new thing, right? So since I've been doing this, blogs were the hot thing, then it was YouTube, then Instagram started. I mean, there have been little ones in between, but then it's been Instagram and it's been TikTok. And each of those has only had a few years of being at the height of, this is the place that you need to be, and where brands were spending, another phrase that I hate. So it's always, where do you go from there? I think that it's a brilliant way of connecting with an audience when you've got something to say, and it's not even having a talent or a skill per se, but what are you trying to do? What's the aim? And if your aim is just to grow, to get some brand deals, I just think it's the opposite of what social media was ever supposed to be, which was a connection.
Democratization of media, democratization of communities, the fact you could actually connect over ideas that would not be represented in mainstream media was huge. And now I think with some elements of TikTok, it can be micro communities and micro niches. And I like those. So like Dungeons and Dragons roll for sandwich. I'm like, this is hilarious. This is a guy who rolls dice every day to decide what's in his sandwiches.
Yeah, but that's great.
That.
You're offering people something.
Yeah, but you're right. I think the thing that is problematic is the intention of, I want to be famous, so I'm only going on this platform.
Yeah, or, I get served if I go into the reels, the bit where you explore them. I don't know what that's called.
Explore tab. There you go.
Thank you.
You got it, explore.
I get served loads of things from faceless accounts saying, I made $18 million in my first year, here's how I did it. Or here are my 15 hooks, and I grew 37,000 followers in a month. And they've all got massive views on those videos. And I think, well, okay, but if that is the sole purpose, and that is your sole purpose, what is that? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? What is that? It's become saturated with these. They could be robots.
Yeah. Oh, I often think like a lot of the commenters are bots as well.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I'm highly cynical, and I do think that.
It's interesting because it's like a dehumanization of your followers. Like, to see, you want to grow because you want to play a numbers game, but then that's dehumanizing the people who follow you, who are supposed to be the reason you start these accounts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what keeps you inspired after 14 years, like, to still make content?
I think because just so many absurd things happen to me, and because I have a constant internal dialogue, which I use for the stuff that I write down. I might not write those things down for weeks or months or years, but I'm thinking them, and I always want to share them. And so the majority of the time that I'll hop onto stories, it's when something's popped into my head and I just feel like I have to get it out there. And I think that's a difference. That is a difference. It's opening Instagram and thinking, oh, what shall I say because I need to do stories today? Or it's, I've got something I have to share. And for me, that's the difference between how I always thought social media worked and why it suddenly, exploded into this huge thing. I mean, look at Zoe used to sit in her bedroom and she would chat to teenage girls, right? And no one had done this before. It was amazing. Suddenly all these kids were thinking, oh my God, this is like having a friend. And they were proper communities. And now, I don't know, what's the community with a faceless account that's just there to sell people a PDF of how they've done their faceless account?
Yeah.
You're going to tell me you've got a faceless account now, aren't you?
No, I don't. But there are things that, it's interesting, because there are things that, I think there are moments where faceless accounts make sense if you're sharing stories that you couldn't share as you.
Oh yeah,
but I don't think the faceless accounts for like Instagram growth hacks and TikTok growth hacks are so depressing.
Aesthetically, when I go through reels, a lot of the time I think, oh, that's really lovely to look at, but it's the ones that are just, they're solely there to tell you how they've grown and how you can grow too. I just start thinking, this is madness. What's going on?
Can I ask? That's something that you said's really, really, really interesting to me, is like you wanted to share like this internal monologue you had. Did you feel lonely in your industry? Did it come from a place of loneliness? Did it come from like not having someone to tell that stuff to? Or did it come from thinking like, I'll be really entertaining?
Yeah, probably. I had never really thought about that before, but life as a model, 80% of the time you're traveling to and from castings, or you're traveling, you're in airports and you're in hotel rooms on your own waiting for a job in wherever, Berlin to start or wherever you are. And so a lot of the time I used to do uni work, so I did my degrees while I was modelling. I used to do it at airports and stuff.
You're such a grafter.
But the other half of the time, I'd just be thinking of bizarre things, and I suppose maybe that is just, if you love writing stuff down, maybe that's what you've got going on in your head anyway, but it was just a more instant way. Did I ever feel lonely? I don't think it's loneliness. I think that I've always just loved spinning a yarn. You know, I'd love to come home and I would say to my parents what I'd done that day, and I'd be exaggerating bits and, you know, hamming it up for comic effect, and I suppose that's just the way I am.
Yeah.
But then how much more perfect could it be to be able to self-publish these things? So blogging came along. It's like I can write stuff and I can instantly put it out there without anybody having to jump through any hoops. No one's going to edit me or say this isn't good enough. As you say, democratized, because the readers decided whether they liked it or not. Yeah. And then it just got tons and tons of readers. So what an amazing thing to happen.
Yeah. It's also, it was such a romanticized career path that very few people knew the reality of underneath.
What, modelling?
So you're probably, modelling. So you're probably living all these stories, but behind the scenes that you could share because you're like a natural storyteller. Yeah. That like pull back the glamorous veil.
Well, exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. Although I just got completely sidetracked by beauty because I've always just loved beauty products, and then people started sending the beauty products and I was in my element, because all of a sudden I wasn't trying one mascara, I was trying one mascara and comparing it to 40 other mascaras, and it just really appealed to me. So I just thought, this is great, just from a purely liking to test loads of stuff point of view, but also having loads of mascaras. I'd never been able to do otherwise.
I've been to a beauty creator's house, and it is like, she used to give you a bag as you walk in the door, because you're not allowed to sell it, you're not allowed to gift it.
No. Most of it, but it does really well for charities, so shelters and things like that. They're so grateful for beauty products, so there's never a sort of shortage of places that you can send samples to that are surplus to needs. But a bag on the way out the door is always nice, isn't it?
It's always good. Yeah, I'll be honest, I thought it was sheer luxury when I turned
I always like farming out a bit of testing as well. So say I've got 30 different retinols, then there's no way I like to give things a really good test. So I, amongst friends, try and sort of sift out and get feedback on other ones, which I find really useful.
You specifically brought up retinol, which is like a real pet peeve topic of mine at the moment.
Oh, is it? Why? What's happened?
I think I have an allergic reaction to retinol. So I had to strip everything out of my routine. You can't see it because my hair is very carefully covering my massive breakout. You have injected so much humour and personality in your content.
Thank you.
Do you feel like that's been consistent, or do you think you had to gain confidence to do that?
No, I feel like that came with Instagram, actually, because it's very hard to inject humour and sustain it in a long YouTube video. Most of my YouTube videos, for some reason, they've always been around 10 minutes. Never longer, never shorter,
Which, given how much the algorithm's changed over the last 14, I'm actually really impressed you kept
I'm just really stubborn. I'm so stubborn. And then I say, why is this not working for me? I've always said, why am I not growing? It's because I'm not doing any of the things you're supposed to do to work with the algorithm, but I refuse to. YouTube did not lend itself to madcap humour, really. And I did have a less formal YouTube channel for a while, and I can't remember what it was called. A model scrapbook. It had a lot of subscribers. I think I binned it off, and that was more vlogs, and there was a lot more humour on that. And I felt like I could, because I liked I can't even say the bloody word, compartmentalise myself for some reason. So I'll be formal on this channel, and then this one I'll be slightly funnier, I'll be slightly more relaxed. And so I was really relaxed on that channel. But I felt like I could never do it. It's quite hard doing a 10-minute long video on your own and sustaining the energy. And so it's hard it's kind of hard to get humour into that. People know that you might be humorous, but it's hard to make it actually funny. And I found that when Instagram started, and especially when Reels started, I could piss ass around a lot more, and it was fine because it was short and I could just do little clips of things. Yeah. And then also a big turning point was when I started doing the odd advert, and I would make those funny. Yeah. And I remember saying to Sam Chapman in a DM or a text or whatever we were on, she was like, "Oh, I loved that video that you did." And I said, "Oh, I wish I could do more funny stuff." And he said, "Well, why don't you then?" I said, "Oh, because it doesn't really fit in with how I make my money, I do beauty stuff, and that's sort of I get paid to test them and be a sensible voice that people can trust, that's credible." And she sort of said, "Well, you know what, you do you, and they will follow. They'll follow what you do well." Well, it's true. Well done, Sam.
That, honestly, so this is one of the things I'll credit TikTok for. I think the advent of that super raw, authentic, I'm bringing my whole self. Yeah. In contrast to that traditional, we used to have beauty brands always say one of the influencers' personas should be a beauty editor. Yeah. And they'd always want like the authority. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that forced people and forces you to be professional. It's like Model Recommends. It's in that space where it's like, I'm talking about things that I would seriously recommend. Whereas TikTok was just like, everyone's kind of fucking about, even if they're no, you're right, actually. I mean, the thing is, I've got nothing against TikTok. I just can't handle the way it is. It's like being inside a pinball machine. It's like I just don't know what I'm doing in here. It's bouncing around inside it, It is ADHD in an app. It's pretty amazing.
It's just crazy. It makes me feel funny inside. But you're right, because actually Instagram followed suit, and then they started doing the snappier stuff, and it wasn't until they gave these formats that lent themselves to doing stupid shit all the time that it was really an option. And actually the real turning point was in COVID, because I did something called Lockdown Diaries on Instagram, and people were trapped and they just wanted some light-hearted relief, and I just did stupid stuff. And people really liked it. So I think that was also a turning point. Yeah.
Well, because it's interesting. Lockdown, I think, made people really crave connection and like this, show me every facet of your being. They didn't necessarily do before, because we were used to going into an office and putting our work selves into a work box, or being a certain way with our friends. And I think when you're just at home, doing everything from home, kind of broke people's now I can't say it, compartmentalised.
It's a really hard word to say.
Compartmentalised brains.
There was a ride at Universal called the Bourne Stunt-tacular. Try saying that when you've had a few. Just the stuntacular. It is a recipe for disaster. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that one. Okay, so moving on to the book, because you've mentioned that one of the things you loved about the blog was the democratization of media and that no one was editing you. Mm-hmm. So firstly, tell us about the book coming out, but secondly, how have you found the process of having an editor and an agent and all this stuff? Like, is it the content from the blog?
Well, that's what I always wanted. So when I finished my MA, I got sort of scouted by a literary agent, and they were quite big, and we were going to be doing books. But then the blog just absolutely took off. Brand deals started happening, and it was a case of, I'm going to just park this very slightly because make hay while the sun shines.
Yeah.
And I didn't even make the mental decision to park it. That just exploded, and I really wanted to write. That was all I wanted to do. But there was just no time because the blog was just 100%, social media was just 100% of what I was doing. Yeah. So this book I've come full circle basically over 14 years. And it was just it was amazing. All I ever wanted to do was sit there and write. And I took 2 months off where I didn't really do anything online very much. And I just sat and wrote. And it was the best time of my life. Genuinely, I'm not being weird.
That was
silly.
Last year. That
was September and October. I did that. I did a little bit in June as well. But there was just loads going on, and I knew that I'm the kind of person that needs to go, right, here's my allotted time. Yeah. I'm going to write it in 2 months. And I'd already done loads of notes and stuff. And actually, I'd kept diaries when I was modelling. And so the material was there. So I'd kept my notes on anecdotes and things like that. I'd kept diaries. And so I knew I had my raw material. I just needed to sit down and actually write it.
So it's not content from the blog, though that's how you got scouted.
No.
It's actually your kind of autobiographical materials from when you were modelling.
Yeah, but written from this perspective. Yeah. So it's all about modelling in the noughties. But it's not really about modelling in the noughties. It's more about me. So it's about the fact that I've got an overactive, morbid imagination, that I catastrophize, that I'm a complete disaster magnet. And it's all of those experiences feed into why I never made it as a supermodel. There were other reasons, physical ones, but it's a big chock-a-block book of things I actually find they're quite relatable because it's mundane situations, and I seem to have the power for it. Disaster in every mundane situation. I can turn it into a complete catastrophe. And that's what used to happen time and time again when I was a model. It's called How Not to Be a Supermodel. And it is a rip-roaring journey. I mean, you can imagine it's quite off the wall. Life as a model in the early noughties. With all of my anecdotal material, including the time when I accidentally became part of an informal sex show. So
well, if that doesn't make me buy it, nothing will.
Pre-order it now. All good booksellers.
I find it interesting that you've graced the covers of, a hell of a lot of magazines.
Yeah.
Elle, Cosmopolitan. Wait, have you done the cover of Vogue?
No, never did the cover of Vogue.
But you've been in Vogue.
Been in Vogue. Yeah, loads.
Yeah.
And other countries. Oh. I can't think of. I'd be like Rouge magazine in Denmark, and Swedish Elle.
You're like, but I couldn't be a supermodel. I'm like, you basically were.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, I always felt like I was sort of teetering on the brink sometimes. And I was on a website when websites first came out. It was still on dial-up, and it was called supermodels.nl. And I remember being on that and thinking, whoa, that's pretty cool. I used to work with Rankin, and I'd be I'd go down the high street, and I might have been in 6 different windows with, huge billboards. And then I'd go into a magazine shop. I don't know, there was a magazine shop called R.D. Franks, not a newsagent's, but it was a specialist. It was just behind where Topshop was. And they used to have all the magazines from around the world, and quite niche magazines, and all of those fashion magazines that cost 20 quid, you know, DV and stuff like that. And I would be in loads of those. And so, for a period, it was pretty good. And so I suppose the book it's just the craziness of that world. And it's a memoir, but it's not grim, you know.
It's important. That's where
yeah, so it's a memoir. I know that lots of people had really terrible experiences. And when I was writing from the perspective as me now in my 40s with 2 kids, I looked back at the things that happened and thought, oh my God, you know, being measured and being told that you were too big when you should see the Polaroids, and hopefully they're going to put them into the book alongside my sort of entries, but I was tiny. And I look back now and I think that is outrageous, but I wanted to write it from the time where I've just written it and I've left it there. And so you judge it, you know? So it's quite light-hearted, and it is just farcical. There is so much stupid shit that goes on that I hope... My editor said she's never read a book that's made her laugh continuously the whole way through. So I'm hoping she's not just...
Blowing smoke up your ass. But I'm sure she won't be. I'm excited. Okay, it's interesting, yeah, because it's... You've had 2... I would love your thoughts on this. You've had 2 careers that both... There was no model of longevity in either of them. The industries you've thrown yourself into are kind of, even at the time you were modelling, there was no career path for that. And now you've thrown yourself into social for the last 14 years, that there's no career path for that. And they're also both very kind of like appearance-based. So how have you, 1, why have you been attracted to these careers? And 2, how have you survived them? How do you ride those waves? How do you get the best from it?
I think I've never wanted anything with a ceiling. Yeah. So I worked at McDonald's when I was 16, and then I sold car insurance when I was in sixth form, right? And those are the jobs that I last had where I had to answer to someone. And although there hasn't been any job security in anything that I've chosen, do you know what? I actually really don't know. That's a really interesting question, because I do crave security. But at the same time, I have ideas that are massively above my station. And some people would say that they're delusional. But I never really thought that they were that delusional. I always just thought, you know what, let's give this a try, and I'm gonna make this work. And actually in the book, you know, there's a lot about me starting off thinking, I'm gonna be famous by next week, I'm gonna be Kate Moss, because in my mind I thought, why wouldn't I be? You know, I'm leaving uni, they've said that I've got a good look, next week fame and fortune will be mine.
So, okay, that level of, 1, lean into the delulu. Like, I'm down for that. I think that's brilliant. Also, another TikTok trend is leaning into your delusionness. But that level of confidence, that level of willingness, do you think you had, this is weird, but like no shame? Like, why, like where?
I don't know, because what's really weird, I only spoke to my husband this morning because I was in the hotel room and I was like tapping away saying, I can't do all this. And he has to quite regularly bolster me up and say, you're good at this. You know what you're doing. And so it's quite weird. I think I just fly through peaks and troughs of thinking, yeah, I can do this. And then going, what the fuck am I doing? You know? And I think with modelling, you know, who wouldn't it, what teenage girl, late teens, I mean, I was early 20s, 19 or 20, wouldn't, if they'd been scouted, go on then, I'll give that a crack. I mean, I was in the law library highlighting things ready to put through the photocopier, and then I get this call. Great, you know.
Where did you get scouted?
I put a Polaroid of myself into a model scouting box in Topshop in Birmingham New Street when I was drunk at lunchtime, which is telling. And then
such a student.
I shouldn't be telling you this. It's all in the book. It's all in the book.
I mean, this just makes me want. I find building
how
in
not
public,
to be a supermodel.
Yeah, how not to be a supermodel. Building in public and being open always drives more sales. That's why I find the more open we are about education, the better we do. Mm-hmm. So you're drunk.
I was drunk. I put the Polaroid into the box with my name and phone number on the back, and then it got caught in the flap. So when they turned it upside down I don't know whether I've actually just embellished this over the years and maybe they just didn't want to call me, but they didn't see it. They didn't see it for ages. And then weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks later, months later, they called and said, oh, we think you've got a really good look. Come on down. And then it all started from there. I was like, see ya, law degree.
And you dropped out of uni
in the second year. Yeah.
Yeah. That's like you just have the confidence. Do you have just moments of this confidence then where you're like, I'm going to do this, and then crippling self-doubt afterwards?
I must do. It's kind of dangerous, really, isn't it?
It's great.
I can scale this building without a rope.
Well,
Shit.
I'm glad you're alive. Glad you haven't done anything like
It's an interesting question, though, and I don't really know how to answer that. I don't know whether it is, why did I think... And they have both relied on my appearance or... the way that I present myself, yeah. So I must have a confidence in it. It must be there.
Do you have, I think it's a nice way to end it. Do you have any advice for aspiring content creators then? I
would say, don't do it just to be a content creator. What's your aim? What do you want to give to people? And what are you getting out of it? Is this going to make you happy? For example... I love my family, I love my kids, I love family life, right? But I don't share them online because I know that won't make me happy. So don't do it so that content creation is your be all and end all. Find something that is going to have longevity and that's going to see you through in a career that you're going to enjoy. Use social media as your tool. It's your live show reel, it's your live, sample of your writing. Or sample of how well you do makeup on people. But, use that as your shop window, but don't let it be your be all and end all. I've just thought of that. I'm really fucking impressed with myself.
That's really good.
Thank you. Even he looks
Arthur's
impressed.
Loving it.
Yeah.
Look how happy Arthur is. Look at his face. No, I think that's awesome.
Great.
Actually enjoying the content you want to make, not for the end of being a successful content creator or the numbers, but for the enjoyment of doing it and what you're trying to build.
So the book actually comes out to buy on the 29th of August. But honestly, I would pre-order it because it is going to be so popular, it will sell out, right? And
this is one of those moments where you say something confident is going to happen. I'm going to read it.
They'll run out of paper, right?
The world will run out of paper.
The world will run out of paper.
The Amazon rainforest is really going to struggle because there'll be too little paper for the demand.
They're going to be there 24 hours a day with their little reels, churning out the
They'll start mandating Kindles because there's so much popularity for the book that you'll have to buy it on Kindle or audiobook.
But on the Kindle, I don't think you get the photos.
Oh, okay.
So,
definitely got to pre-order
hardback.
So, yeah, cool.
That's the way to go.
Brilliant. So, please pre-order How Not to Be a Supermodel.
Yeah.
Very excited to read it.
From now.
Thank you very much for watching this episode of Creator Behind the Influence with Ruth Crilly. And please pre-order her book, How Not to Be a Supermodel. We'll link it below. If you want to subscribe to watch more of these creator interviews, please do. Thank you.